I'm excited this morning to have every single one of y'all. I'm so excited. I want you to touch your neighbor and tell them, are you happy today? Are you happy today? Because God is alive. And if God is alive, that's the reason to be happy. We're going to begin today. The title of our series that we're starting today is Grace. And the title of my message is Breaking the Cycle. So I want you to touch your neighbor again and say, you're about to be my best friend. Don't be shy. And say, break the cycle today. Break the cycle today. God's going to do something amazing. I believe it. I believe it. How many times do we go in life and we feel like we're living in this constant cycle? And sometimes this cycle is not healthy for our lives. It doesn't help us grow in God. It actually takes us away from the things of God. And so those are the cycles that I want us to break this morning. And the only way we're going to break those cycles is when we encounter grace. You don't have to be a well-known philosopher to understand that the world is full of brokenness. We see it on the news. We see it in our schools. We see it in the business world. And sometimes we even see it in church. We live in a generation that looks for joy and happiness
Estamos en una generación que busca por felicidad
in money,
en el dinero,
in popularity,
en popularidad,
and in careers,
en carreras,
and in drugs,
en drogas,
in sex.
en sexo.
But all that leads
Pero todo eso va
to more addiction
para más adicciones
and more brokenness.
y más quebrantamiento.
That's all it leads.
Es todo lo que es.
And we live in this constant cycle.
Y vivimos en este ciclo.
And we experience brokenness.
Y experimentamos con el
And more
quebrantamiento
brokenness.
y más quebrantamiento.
And no matter how many times we try to get ourselves out,
Y no importa cuántas veces los tratamos de salir,
we can't break the
no
cycle.
lo podemos quebrar ese ciclo.
There is a desperate need for grace.
Hay una desesperación para la gracia.
And let me tell you what grace
Y
is.
déjame decirle que es gracia.
Grace is Jesus 2,000 years ago,
La gracia es Jesús hace 2000 años.
willfully dying on a cross.
Muriendo sobre una cruz.
He wasn't murdered.
No fue asesinado.
He sacrificed
Él
himself
se sacrificó
for your life.
él mismo por su vida.
Our world needs Jesus.
Nuestro mundo necesita Jesús.
We need grace.
Nosotros necesitamos gracia.
And my whole point today,
Y mi punto hoy,
I'm not finishing,
no ha terminado,
but I want to drop that in your mind.
pero quiero dejarle esto en la mente.
Grace
Gracia
breaks the bondage.
quebranta
It breaks the cycle.
el ciclo, rompe el ciclo.
Grace breaks the cycle.
Gracia rompe el ciclo.
The love of Jesus breaks the cycle.
El amor de Jesús rompe el ciclo.
The person of Jesus breaks the
La
cycle.
persona de Jesús rompe el ciclo.
And so, one of the things we got to understand today
Y una de las cosas que tenemos que entender hoy
is what is grace?
es qué es la gracia.
What is this grace that Pastor Kevin is talking
Esta
about?
gracia que yo estoy hablando de.
One definition that we find in Scripture
Una definición que miramos en la Biblia
is grace is the unmerited favor of God.
es que la gracia es el favor perfecto de Dios.
We don't deserve it.
No lo merecemos,
There's nothing we can do to earn it,
no hay nada que podamos hacer para obtenerlo,
but God, through Jesus Christ,
pero Dios por Jesucristo
simply gives it.
simplemente se los da a los otros.
He gives and He keeps on giving.
Lo da y lo seguirá dando.
Let's go to Ephesians chapter 2, verse 7 through 9.
Vamos para Efesios 2, 7 y 9.
If you're reading in Spanish, it should be on the... Okay, if you're reading in Spanish, it'll be on the screens. Can we put the Spanish ones on the screen? And it says, so that in the ages to come, he might show the surpassing riches of his grace and kindness towards us in Christ Jesus. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and not of yourselves. It is a gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. Let's go to Romans 11:6.
Romanos 11:6.
And it says, but if it is by grace, it is no longer on a basis of works. Otherwise, grace is no longer grace. Grace is free.
Gracia es gratis.
It's the free gift of God.
Es el
for our
regalo
lives.
gratis de Dios.
So let's look at a couple things.
So vamos a ver unas cosas.
Salvation,
Salvación,
miracles,
milagros,
favor,
favores,
blessings,
bendiciones,
anointing,
unción
and
y
purpose
propósito
are all things God gives
son todas las cosas que Dios da
through His Son,
por su Hijo
grace, Jesus Christ.
en gracia por Jesús.
A genuine picture of grace
Una imagen genuina de gracia
is Jesus
es Jesús
getting off His throne
bajándose del trono
and putting on the appearance of a man,
y poniéndose el mantel de hombre,
humbling Himself unto death,
humillándose a la muerte
even death on a cross.
y muerte en una cruz.
The cross was one of the most embarrassing deaths that you could ever endure.
Muriendo en la cruz era algo que no era aceptable en ese entonces.
It was embarrassing. It was the worst punishment you could ever experience.
Era el peor
penalty that you could experience.
Castigo.
And Jesus willfully
Y Jesús
took it.
lo tomó
And He didn't say a word.
y no dijo una palabra.
He simply
Solamente
was faithful
era fiel
to the penalty
al castigo
that was against humanity.
que fue en contra de la humanidad.
And that's a picture of grace.
Esa es la imagen de gracia.
Freedom in our physical,
Libertad en nuestro físico
and our spiritual,
y en nuestro espiritual
and in our mind
y en nuestra mente
is only attained
es solamente obtenido
through grace.
por la gracia.
You cannot work for freedom.
No puedes trabajar por la libertad.
You can experience blessings
No puedes experimentar
through things that we do for God,
por las cosas que hacemos para Dios.
but God is giving it to you
Pero Dios los está dando
because He loves you,
porque los ama.
not because you're working for it.
No porque está trabajando por él.
Although it seems like we earned it,
Aunque se mire que lo obtenemos.
but how many times in life have you just went from one place to another so broken,
Pero a veces en la vida vamos de un lugar a otro quebrantado,
so messed up,
tan quebrantado,
but God still gives us grace.
pero Dios ya los da la gracia.
And He still says, I love you more today than I did
Y los
yesterday.
dice que los ama más hoy que ayer.
That's a picture of grace.
Esa es la imagen de gracia.
If you have breath in your body,
Si tiene aire en sus pulmones,
then you have grace.
entonces tiene gracia.
If you have breath in your body,
Si tiene aliento,
then you have hope.
tiene una esperanza.
We begin to discover through grace
Comenzamos a ver por la gracia
God's raw, unconditional love
el amor perfecto de Jesucristo
to rescue
para
us
rescatarlos
from our own brokenness.
de nuestro propio quebrantamiento.
Know that today,
Escúchame hoy,
that God loves you so much
que Dios los ama tanto
that His main mission on earth
que su misión principal
was to rescue you,
fue rescatarte a ti.
was to redeem your life.
Fue para
It was to restore you.
restaurarlos.
So where does grace come from?
Entonces, ¿de dónde viene la gracia?
It comes from the greatest event ever recorded in history,
Viene por el evento más grandioso en nuestra historia,
the cross of Jesus Christ.
la cruz de Jesucristo.
I want to say this statement.
Voy a decir esto.
Jesus is grace.
Jesús es gracia.
He doesn't just give grace.
No nomás da gracia.
He is the essence of grace.
Jesús es la esencia de gracia.
It consumes his entire being.
Lo consume en su interior.
Imagine a world
Imagínense un mundo
where every single person
donde cada persona
is consumed
es consumido
by the grace of Jesus
por la gracia
Christ.
de Jesucristo.
That would mean that every single person
Eso será que cada persona
is literally immersed,
que está sujetida,
consumed
consumida
by the person of Jesus.
para la persona que es Jesucristo.
That's grace.
Eso es gracia.
Jesus is the creator.
Jesús es el creador,
He's the sustainer.
es sostendor
And he's the giver of
y
grace.
dador de gracia.
John 3:16 and 17
Juan 3:16.
says, For God so loved the world
Por Dios tan así amó el mundo
that he gave his only begotten Son,
que dio su Hijo,
that whoever believes in him
que todo que cree en Él
shall not perish,
no,
but will have eternal life.
pero tendrá vida eterna.
For God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world,
Porque Dios no mandó al Hijo en el mundo,
but that the world might be saved through him.
pero Él será salvo por Él.
Romans 5:8.
Romanos 5:8.
But God demonstrated his love toward us,
Pero Dios demostró su amor para los otros,
that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for you.
que siendo pecadores, Jesucristo murió por
Another
nosotros.
translation, the King James says, while we were at enmity with God, while we were at war with God,
Cuando estamos en contra de Dios,
on the opposite side of God,
oponiendo a Dios,
God said, you know what?
Dios dijo,
I'm gonna make a plan.
Dios dijo, voy a ser
I'm gonna send my son
va a mandar su Hijo
to die for
para morir
the opposing side,
para los que me oponen.
because that's how much love he had.
Porque eso es cuánto amor tenía.
While you are on the opposite side of
Cuando
God,
todos estábamos en contra de Dios,
he gave everything for you
Él dio todo para nosotros,
so that you could have eternal life,
para que usted pueda tener vida eterna,
so that you could experience grace,
para poder experimentar la
so that you
gracia,
could break the cycle.
para poder romper los ciclos.
There's a cycle of sin and shame and guilt that happens in our lives.
Hay un ciclo de pecado que los obtiene en nuestras vidas.
There's sin,
Hay pecado,
and because of the sin,
y porque el pecado
you get into this place of feeling guilty,
sientes con culpabilidad,
and then you feel shameful for what you did.
y luego te sientes
You're embarrassed for what you did.
avergonzado de lo que hiciste.
And we live in this constant cycle.
Vivimos en este ciclo,
But we got to understand today
pero tenemos que entender hoy
that Jesus died to break that cycle.
que Jesús murió para romper ese ciclo.
And God gives grace for that.
Y Dios da gracia para eso.
Titus 2:11. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to all men. John 1:16 and 17. For of his fullness we have all received, and grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. We got to understand today.
Tenemos que entender hoy
Jesus
que Jesús
fulfilled the law
cumplió la ley
so you could live through grace.
para que usted pueda vivir por la gracia.
Jesus
Jesús
fulfilled the law
cumplió la ley
so you could live through grace,
para que usted pueda vivir en la gracia,
so that you could experience grace.
para poder experimentar la gracia.
It comes from Jesus.
Viene de Jesús.
I want us to go to John chapter 8,
Para Juan 8,
verse 1 through 11.
1 al 11.
And I want to talk about the power of
Y
grace.
quiero hablar sobre el poder de la gracia.
And I want to go through a story,
Y quiero ir por esta historia
because I believe that we see a picture of Jesus
porque vemos la imagen de Jesús
literally living grace
viviendo la gracia.
while
Mientras
he's fulfilling the law.
cumpliendo la ley.
And so let's open up our Bibles to John chapter 8,
Juan capítulo 8, versículo 1 al 11.
verse 1 through 11. If you're going to be following me on Spanish, you'll be on the screen. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning, he came again into the temple. And all the people were coming to him, and he sat down and he began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and set her in the center of the court. They said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery in the very act. Now in the law of Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. What then do you say?" They were saying this, testing him, so that they might have grounds for accusing him. But Jesus stooped to the ground with his finger, wrote on the ground. But when they persisted in asking him, he straightened up and he said to them, "He who is without sin among you, let him be the first to throw a stone." Verse 8, again after he stooped down and wrote on the ground, when they heard it, they began to go out one by one, beginning with the older ones. And he was left alone, and the woman where she was in the center of the court. Straightening up, Jesus said to her, "Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "I do not condemn you either. Go from now on and sin no more." So there are a couple of things that I want to highlight through this text.
So quiero que miren algo en este texto.
I see a woman living in a cycle.
Vemos una mujer viviendo un ciclo.
You won't see that if you just read it surface level.
No lo verás si nomás lo lee.
You got to really study what the writer is saying.
Necesita que ver lo que el escritor está diciendo.
The Bible says that the Pharisees were trying to set up Jesus.
La Biblia dice que los fariseos quieren
They wanted to trap.
quieren atrapar a Jesús.
Anybody ever tried to trap something?
¿Alguien ha tratado de atrapar algo?
Down here in the valley, there's a lot of people that try to trap possums, right? Everybody knows, right? You use citrus fruit, right?
Usan la fruta.
And then you have that big old cage that looks like a dog cage.
Y una jaula de
Other people try to trap mice, mouse,
otros
rats,
las ratas.
right? And if you're really conniving,
Y si está
you try to trap your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad.
tratas de atrapar a tu familia.
You try to do pranks on people. And in order to do something like this,
Para hacer algo así,
you have to be watching that person for a while.
necesitas que ver a esa persona por un tiempo.
You don't just say, "I'm going to put a trap," and then right away you
No
catch
dices que
it.
nomás vas a atrapar a alguien y ya se hace.
Whenever you're trying to catch a possum,
Cuando tratas de cachar una tacuache,
it usually gets the best of you the first few times.
no lo atrapas las primeras 2-3 veces.
Maybe your brother or your sister, right?
A lo mejor tu hermano o tu hermana.
You don't get them the first or the second time.
No los agarras la primera.
I remember
tercera
one
vez.
time,
Una vez,
my brother, when I first had got my iPad,
cuando yo primero obtení mi
this was a
iPad,
long time ago, all right?
fue hace años.
My brother would log in on his Facebook on my iPad,
Mi hermano se ponía en su Facebook en mi iPad.
and he would search stuff and whatever on his
Y
Facebook.
él usaba su Facebook.
Well, one of these days he forgot to sign out,
Y uno de los días él se olvidó de
and I
salirse
knew
de
that he
Facebook.
always forgot to sign out.
Y yo sabía que siempre se olvidaba.
And so for a whole week I wrote stuff on his Facebook,
Entonces por toda la semana yo escribí por
and he
el
hardly
Facebook.
gets on Facebook,
Y él no se sube tanto
and he didn't even know I was writing
y ni
things.
sabía lo que estaba
And
pasando.
I put a lot of embarrassing stuff.
Y puso bastante cosas que no quería que
And
estén.
so, going back to the story,
Entonces yendo para atrás para la historia,
trapping someone.
para atrapando a alguien,
The Pharisees were trying to trap
los
Jesus.
fariseos tratando de atrapar a Jesús.
They weren't going to try to trap Jesus
No iban a atrapar a Jesús
with someone they didn't know was living in a cycle.
con alguien que no sabían que estaban viviendo en un ciclo.
They had to be sure this woman
Estaban seguros que esta
was
mujer
going to commit adultery,
que cometía
and that not just that they were going to catch her in the act.
y que le iban
Because they were about to accuse Jesus.
iban a acusar a Jesús.
This was their moment.
Fue su momento,
They didn't want to mess it up.
no lo quieran hacer mal.
You see, that's a lot to grab
Y es mucho para obtener.
from just reading the
En
scripture
solamente
surface level.
leyendo la
You have to
escritura.
understand.
Tenemos que
The
entender.
Pharisees feel like this is their one shot.
Los fariseos sienten que esta es su única oportunidad.
And so there are three things we can see this story in.
So vamos a ver tres cosas en esta historia.
Maybe you're Jesus.
A lo mejor eres Jesús.
Maybe you're that person that, is living right and doing the right thing and giving grace.
Es la persona viviendo en la gracia
And someone's trying to trap you.
y alguien lo está atrapando.
And you're living in this cycle
Y estás viviendo en un ciclo
where somebody is just always out to get you.
donde alguien siempre lo está tratando de bajarles.
Or maybe you're the woman
O a lo mejor eres la mujer
and you're so full of brokenness.
y estás tan quebrantada,
You're so full of shame. You're so full of guilt and sin.
estás llena de pecado
And you have no idea how to break the
y
cycle.
no sabes cómo romper ese ciclo.
And there's a bunch of people accusing you.
Hay mucha gente acusándote
And then there's another person on the other side giving you grace and you don't know what to do.
y alguien está tratando de darte gracia y no sabes qué hacer.
Or maybe you're like the Pharisees
O a lo mejor eres los fariseos
and you're the one throwing the
y
stones.
estás tirando usted la
And
piedra
you're the one trying to correct
y
everybody.
estás tratando de corregir a todos.
And God is just telling you, just give grace.
Y Dios solamente te está diciendo que
Because
da
there was a
gracia.
moment when you needed
Porque
grace.
estaba un momento que usted
There was a
necesitaba
moment
gracia.
when you were so full of brokenness you had no idea what to do.
Estabas tan lleno de quebrantamiento que no sabías qué hacer.
And I gave you
Y
grace.
Dios dice que yo te di la
The
gracia.
Bible says freely give, just as you have freely
La Biblia
received.
dice que demos como hemos obtenido
And so-
libertadamente.
We have to understand how to give grace.
So, tenemos que entender cómo vivir en gracia.
Because without it,
Porque sin Él
we're not going to be living
no viviéramos
in the freedom that we should be living every day.
en la libertad que tenemos todos los días.
Another thing to highlight,
Otra cosa para mirar.
this isn't what we call a small sin.
Esto no es algo que llamamos un pecado pequeño.
Even though scripture says there is no measure of sin, sin is sin.
Porque la escritura dice que todo el pecado es igual.
But during this time,
Pero en este tiempo,
adultery,
la adultería,
the punishment for that,
el
the penalty
castigo
for that, in the law, under the law of Moses,
abajo la ley de Moisés
was you had to be stoned.
era
So it's almost like taking the death penalty
es tener la
for committing adultery.
por cometer adultería es muerte.
And so this is a huge situation.
So es algo más grande.
Someone takes the penalty of adultery, which is to be murdered,
Morir por adulterio,
or do we let her free when she was caught in the act?
o le dejamos vivir cuando fue.
And there's an uprising happening in this time.
Y algo está pasando.
Everybody's talking about Jesus.
Toda la gente está hablando de Jesús.
And the Pharisees cannot stand
Y
it.
los fariseos no lo
They're
pueden.
just like, no, this guy is blasphemy.
Es,
This guy is preaching wrong truth.
Jesús no está predicando la verdad.
He's not doing the right thing.
No está haciendo las cosas correctamente.
Moses would be ashamed of him.
Que Moisés estaría derrotado de
And there was this uprising.
Había
And the Pharisees knew that Jesus,
los fariseos sabían que Jesús,
if they let him continue,
que si lo dejaban continuar,
he would overrule the government.
que Jesucristo,
That's how powerful a move of God was happening. That's how powerful the move of God
y es
that
eso
was
que
happening.
fue poderosamente Jesús.
And so the woman is standing, they set her in the center.
So, pues, la mujer estaba en el centro
And the Pharisees tell Jesus,
y los fariseos le dicen a Jesús,
she was caught in the act.
ella fue descubierta en el acto.
The law of Moses says
La ley de Moisés dice
she should be stoned.
que debe de morir.
But what do you say?
Pero, y le pregunta, ¿pero qué dice usted?
Anybody ever told you what to do, and then they say, but what do you think we should do?
Alguien le ha dicho cómo hacer algo y luego te dicen
What
cómo
they're
hacerlo.
really saying is, you need to do what I just said.
Y en verdad están diciendo,
That's the right answer.
dices que hacer lo que yo
I know
digo.
we all have those people that,
Todos tenemos a gente en nuestra vida,
or maybe you're that person.
o a lo mejor eres tú.
But this was happening.
Pero esto estaba pasando.
This was the event. This
Este
was
fue el
the
evento.
picture.
Esta fue la imagen.
Anybody ever felt like the woman?
¿Alguien se ha sentido como una mujer?
I'm not saying you committed adultery,
No estoy diciendo que cometió el mismo acto,
but you feel like you're in this cycle
pero sientes que estás en este ciclo
of sin,
de pecado,
shame, and guilt. and you have no idea what to do.
y no sabes qué hacer.
Or maybe you feel like you're in this cycle of closed doors.
O a lo mejor estás en un ciclo de puertas cerradas.
Maybe you're in this cycle where you just don't know what to do.
En un ciclo que no sabes qué hacer.
Maybe you're in this cycle
A lo mejor estás en un ciclo
of depression, anxiety,
de depresión
and you have no idea how to get free.
y no sabes cómo salir.
Maybe you're in this cycle of feeling lonely.
A lo mejor estás en este ciclo de sentirte solo.
Maybe you're in this cycle of not hearing
O
God.
a lo mejor estás en un ciclo que no puedes escuchar a Dios.
Maybe you're in this cycle where you just feel like you don't know what your next step is.
O a lo mejor un ciclo que no sabes qué es el siguiente paso.
These cycles
Estos ciclos
try to get you to give up on God.
te quieren parar de seguirle a Dios.
They try to get you to give up on purpose.
Te tratan de obtener en ese mismo lugar.
But I want to tell you today,
Pero le quiero decir ahora
Jesus wants to tell you today
que Jesús te quiere decir
that He wants to break that
que quiere
cycle.
romper esos
Whatever form it may be,
ciclos. Cualquier forma que es,
He wants to break it
lo quiere quebrantar.
because He wants to put you on course
Porque te quiere poner
with His destiny for your life.
en el destino que Él tiene para usted.
Because we are people of purpose.
Porque somos gente de propósito.
Anybody ever felt like you just want purpose?
¿Alguien se ha sentido que nomás necesita propósito?
You just want to matter?
Quiere importar.
It's part of who we are.
Es parte de quién somos.
And so going back to the story,
Yendo para atrás para la historia,
Jesus isn't caught by surprise in this situation.
Jesús no fue sorprendido.
He wasn't caught by surprise.
No fue sorprendido.
He did something so defining.
Hizo algo,
It's like he ignores the Pharisees.
ignoró a los fariseos.
He goes down
Se bajó para abajo
and he starts writing on the
y
ground.
comenzó a escribir.
He doesn't even answer the Pharisees at this
No
point.
respondió a los fariseos.
Imagine how the Pharisees must have felt.
Imagínense cómo se sentían los fariseos.
Has any of y'all ever asked someone something and then they ignore you and do something else?
Han sentido que alguien lo ha ignorado y hacer algo completamente diferente.
Imagine if it was if what you guys were talking about was a case of murder.
Imagínense hablando de alguien muriendo y no escuchaban nada.
The disrespect they must have
El
felt.
desrespeto que han de sentir.
But the Pharisees didn't understand a lot of things.
Los fariseos no entendieron bastante, entendieron algo.
And Jesus stoops to the ground
Y Jesús se bajó al piso
and he starts writing in the ground.
y comenzó a escribir en el piso.
And as I'm reading that,
Y escuchando eso,
I remember the old covenant
recuerdo al Antiguo Testamento.
when God wrote his commandments
Cuando Dios escribió los mandamientos
with his finger.
con su dedo.
Jesus is literally writing with his finger.
Jesús está escribiendo con su dedo igual.
The Pharisees did not have the revelation that John had,
Los fariseos no tenían la revelación que Juan tenía.
because John starts chapter 1.
Porque Juan comenzó el capítulo 1.
In the beginning was the Word,
En el principio fue la palabra.
and the Word was with God,
Y la palabra era con Dios.
and the Word was God.
Y la palabra era Dios.
And Jesus said,
Y Jesús dijo,
I am the bread of life.
yo soy el pan de vida.
I am the Word.
Soy la palabra.
And so if Jesus is the Word,
Y si Jesús es la palabra,
and the Word was with God,
y la palabra era con Dios,
Jesus was there
Jesús estaba ahí.
as God wrote the commandments.
Cuando Dios
This
escribió los
didn't catch Jesus by surprise.
no sorprendieron a Jesús.
What they did not
Lo
understand
que no entendieron
was
fue que
Jesus was the fulfillment
Jesús era el cumplimiento
of the very law they couldn't complete.
de la ley que ellos no pudieran completar.
And he was fulfilling it
Y él cumplió
with his life.
con su vida,
With his life.
con su vida.
And he was writing in the ground.
Y estaba escribiendo en el piso.
And I could imagine
Y puedo imaginar
a courtroom
adentro de
and the prosecutor, the accusers.
viendo a toda la gente alrededor
You're guilty.
diciendo que eres culpable.
And Jesus write the word grace right over every mistake and every failure.
Y luego Jesús escribiendo gracias sobre todos los.
Aleluya.
So I want to tell you today,
Solo quiero decir hoy
Jesus will write the word grace over every sin,
que Jesucristo escribirá gracias sobre cada pecado,
over every mistake,
cada error,
over every failure.
cada fracaso.
He'll rewrite your past failures. He'll rewrite your story
Escribirá tu nueva historia
with grace,
con gracia
so that your life
para que tu vida
goes back on course
se pueda alinear
with your destiny.
con tu destino.
Too many times
Muchas veces
we allow
dejamos que
circumstances
ciertas cosas que pasan
and
y
situations
situaciones
to detour us,
que los quiten de donde Dios los quiere llevar,
to take us away from the places God wants us to be.
del lugar que Dios
How
quiere llevar.
how many times
¿Cuántas veces
have you talked yourself out of
te has hablado a ti mismo fuera de
what God is trying to talk you into?
lo que Dios te quiere llevar para?
And I'll just be very transparent.
Y voy a ser transparente con ustedes.
It happened a lot when we started this.
Pasó muchas veces cuando comenzamos este movimiento.
There were times where
Había tiempos que
our biggest enemy was ourselves.
nuestro más grande enemigo era nosotros.
And there were moments where we were trying to talk ourselves out of
Y había momentos que los queríamos quitar de
what God was trying to talk us into.
lo que Dios nos quiere llevar para.
And this happens every day.
Y esto pasa cada día.
This happens, and we live like this in cycles.
Y vivimos en este ciclo.
Well, if God wanted me to do that, He would open a door.
Que si Dios nos quería hacer esto, abría una puerta.
Well, if God wanted me to do that, He would bless me financially.
Si Dios quería que yo hiciera eso, me
Well, if God
bendeciría.
wanted me to do that, He'd heal my body.
Si Él quería que yo hiciera, sería sanado.
Well, if God wanted me to do that, He would speak to me audibly.
Si Dios quería que hiciera eso, Él me hablaba a mí mismo.
Instead of being faithful
En vez de tener la fe
to what God is calling us
de lo
to,
que Dios nos está hablando
and being obedient
y ser obediente
to the dreams
al sueño
and the plans that He has
y
for
los planes que
you.
Él tiene para nosotros.
God wants you to fulfill your destiny.
Dios quiere que cumpla tu destino,
But it's not going to happen by somebody handing you a piece of cake.
pero no va a ser Él nomás alguien dándote
There's going to
todo.
be hard days
Va a
ahead.
haber días difíciles.
There's going to be troubled waters ahead.
Va a haber tiempos que no todo sucede bien.
But I have good news for
Pero
you.
tengo buenas nuevas para usted.
With the sound of one word,
Con el sonido de una palabra,
Jesus calmed the storm.
Dios calmó el mar.
The faith of Jesus walked on water.
La fe de Jesús caminó sobre las aguas.
The power of
El
Jesus
poder de Dios
bursted the tomb open.
abrió la tumba.
What are you scared
¿De
of?
qué tienes miedo hoy?
With the sound of one word, one statement, not one word, one statement.
Con solo decir
Jesus tells the crowd,
Jesucristo le dice
he who has no sin cast the first stone.
Él que está libre del pecado, tirarle la primera piedra.
And one by one,
Y uno por uno,
they all left.
todos se fueron.
And then he said to the woman,
Y luego él le dijo a la mujer,
he said, has anyone thrown any stones?
¿alguien te ha tirado una piedra?
Who has condemned you?
¿Quién te ha condenado?
And she says, no one, Lord.
Y ella dijo, nadie, Señor.
And he says one of the greatest statements I think are ever recorded
Y
in the
él
New
dijo
Testament.
algo
He
profundo.
says, go and sin no more.
Le dice, ve y no peques más.
Because for those that are in Christ
Porque
Jesus,
ellos que están en Jesucristo,
there is no condemnation.
no hay condenación.
For those that are in grace,
Porque ellos que están en gracia,
there is no
no
condemnation.
hay condenación.
Jesus paid the penalty.
Jesús pagó el precio.
Jesus rode over every sin.
Jesús escribió todo cada pecado.
The price was paid.
El precio fue pagado.
There's freedom for you today.
Hay libertad para usted hoy.
Maybe you're here today
A lo mejor está aquí hoy.
and you're stuck in this cycle.
Estás en este
And
sitio.
there's doubters and accusers all around you.
Y todos cae gigante alrededor de usted
Let me
diciendo que
tell you,
no.
grace has the power to shut the mouth of the adversary.
Pero gracia tiene el poder de callar
He
cada
shuts
quien
the
en
mouth
contra
of
de ti.
every accuser.
Cada quien que está
He
contra de
shuts
ti.
the mouth of every person pointing their finger
Calla
at
a
you.
todos que quieren bajarte de donde Dios te quiere poner.
That woman who committed adultery,
Esa mujer que cometió ese pecado,
standing right there in the center,
parada ahí en el centro,
experiences grace for the first time.
experimentó gracia por la primera vez.
I'm sure she tried. Nobody likes living in a cycle
Nadie le gusta vivir en un ciclo
where you have no purpose,
donde no tienes propósito,
I'm sure she tried everything to get free.
estoy seguro que trató de hacer todo para salirse.
But the moment she encounters grace,
Pero cuando fue enfrentado con gracia,
the cycle is broken.
el ciclo fue rompido.
Her life is changed
La vida fue
forever.
cambiada por siempre.
That same power
Ese mismo poder
is available to you
está
today.
disponible para usted hoy.
It doesn't matter the hole that you might be in.
No importa en qué se ha metido.
It doesn't matter how dark your situation
No
might
importa qué
be.
tan oscuro esté.
It doesn't matter how much of a mess you might find
No
yourself
importa qué
in right
tanto
now.
esté.
The grace of Jesus Christ will reach
La gracia de Jesús rescatará
and He'll bring you out.
y te sacará de donde estás.
He'll bring you out.
Sacará.
The love of Jesus Christ over your life
El amor de Jesucristo sobre tu vida
is greater than the cycle you can't get free from.
es más grande del ciclo que estés.
Believe me when I say it.
Y créeme cuando yo le digo.
It's greater than any problem you may have
Es más
right
grande de
now.
cualquier problema que
It's
usted
greater
tiene
than
ahorita.
any sickness
Es
you
más grande que
might be
cualquier
confronting you
enfermedad.
right now. It's greater than
más
any
grande
situation
de cada
you may
situación
feel stuck in.
Que se pueda estar atrapado en.
Jesus Christ will rewrite your story.
Jesucristo te escribirá una nueva historia.
I like to imagine this.
Me gusta imaginar esto.
He's writing on the ground.
Está escribiendo en el piso.
I like to imagine a couple things.
Me gusta ver.
He's rewriting the new covenant.
Está escribiendo el nuevo el pacto de gracia.
He's rewriting it.
Lo está
But
escribiendo.
he's also rewriting your story.
Pero también está escribiendo tu nueva historia.
How many times do we feel like our story is so messed up that it can't get redeemed?
Cuando sentimos que nuestra historia está,
That it can't get restored?
no puede ser restaurada,
But I have news for you
pero yo
today.
tengo nuevas para usted.
The grace of Jesus Christ,
La gracia de Jesucristo
it will rewrite any mistake you've ever experienced.
te escribirá una nueva historia.
He will rewrite your entire life.
Escribe,
It doesn't matter how many times you failed.
no importa cuántas veces
It
fracasaste.
doesn't matter how many times you got it wrong.
No importa cuántas veces agarraste algo mal.
It doesn't matter how many years you have allowed yourself to cultivate the things that have drowned the life of God
No
out of
importa
you.
cuántos años estás cumplido fuera de Dios.
God has grace for you today.
Dios tiene gracia para usted hoy.
As long as you have breath in your
Que
body,
tengas aliento en tu ser.
grace is available to
Gracia
you.
está disponible para usted.
Hope is available to you.
Esperanza está disponible.
Our God is the God of second chances.
Nuestro Dios es el Dios de
Our
segunda
God is the
oportunidad.
God of third chances.
Es la oportunidad,
Our
tercera.
God is the God of fourth chances and fifth chances and sixth chances. It doesn't matter.
No importa,
He'll give you grace
te
today.
da gracia.
There's no mistake too deep that God can't bring you out of.
No hay un pecado o algo que Dios no te pueda sacar de.
Listen to me this morning.
Escúchame esta mañana.
He will erase every mistake,
Él borrará
every failure,
cada fracaso
and every shattered dream.
y cada sueño quebrantado.
You may stand to your feet. I'm going to conclude with this. But a lot of times these mistakes and this sin and this shame and this guilt,
Pero a veces todo este pecado
it shatters the dreams we have.
quebranta los sueños que tenemos.
It shatters the dreams that we have.
Destruye los sueños que tenemos.
It shatters the plans that we have.
Destruye los planes que nosotros tenemos.
And we live in this cycle. We don't know what to do.
Vivimos este siglo que no sabemos qué hacer.
But the power of grace
Pero el poder de gracia
that moved the tomb
que movió la tumba
and raised Jesus back
y
up
resucitó a Jesús
and literally took this book
y que llevó este libro.
this book has been going around for thousands of years.
Este libro está sobre 1000 años, 2000
And
años.
people full of grace
Y gente llena de gracia
have kept this book alive.
han mantenido este libro vivo.
It's the most sold book in the world.
Es el libro más vendido en el mundo.
Nothing, no persecution,
No
no opposition
oposición
was able to keep this book from being here today.
pudo detener de que este libro esté aquí hoy.
That's how powerful grace is.
Ese es qué tan poderoso es la gracia.
That 2,000 years ago, Jesus rose from the dead.
Que hace 2000 años Jesús fue resucitado.
It was so powerful that we're still talking about it today.
Fue tan fuerte que
It was so life altering that we're talking about it today.
Fue algo tan grande que todavía estamos
The power of it is so transforming that we're still talking about it today.
Transformando que estamos hablando de él hoy.
There's grace for you today.
Hay gracia para usted.